As soon as the large-scale screening unlimited game is released, almost 1% of Earth players are pulled into it, and countless people from small worlds have also entered this supposedly fair game, including the notorious cult of tomb robbing world. Lin Shuang is a very crazy person, but on the surface, you can't tell that she is crazy at all. She seems to have two sides, compassion for heaven and earth, and regards life as worthless. No one is the person she can talk to, and no one can understand her. Does evil and evil seem to not conflict? I see what everyone is saying, the persona has added some private settings. This is a cool article. It's a novel about infinite games. Novels have spirit, how to write essays in the future. Chapter 1. Introduction to the game. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Outside the classroom, birds chirped one after another, cicadas shouted loudly. In the hot and humid weather, even the wind didn't want to move, and the curtains were too lazy to open, blocking the outside sky tightly. The bright fluorescent lights make the classroom bright. Even if there are a few flickering lights, it does not affect the brightness of the classroom. The air conditioning and fans are turned on together, and the cool breeze in the classroom carries ice. Many students have to put on their jackets to avoid catching a cold, but there are also students who are so hot that they even want to roll up their short sleeves. Lin Shuang was dozing off with her chin propped up and her head slowly moving. At some point, she suddenly lifted her drooping eyelids and slowly let go, scanning the classroom with a hint of doubt. She moved her body, withdrew her gaze, and glanced at the computer. There was only 1 minute left until class was over, and Lin Shuang was visibly happy. Hey, she woke up in time. 1 minute later, the bell for the end of class rang on time, and the teacher stopped chattering and announced the end of class. The classmates stood up in an instant, and fell down in an instant, with constant communication and playfulness. Lin Shuang stood up and smiled while talking to the classmates. He walked to his phone bag and touched it, then turned around and walked towards the corridor. The classroom was still a bit cold, so he had to go outside to warm up before coming back to turn on the air conditioning. Lin Shuang unlocked his phone and glanced at the social media app. Apart from the news push, there was no other information. Lin Shuang only glanced and turned off his phone, stuffing it into his pocket. She looked up towards the front, ready to take a look at the scenery outside, to alleviate the slightly dull eyes that had been staring at electronic screens for a long time. Although she had just dozed off and regained consciousness, it still did not prevent her eyes from becoming sour. There were several boys playing around in the hallway, all familiar classmates, but she didn't want to say hello. Her thoughts were swirling in her head, not knowing where she was heading. Suddenly, a black dot flashed before his eyes. Lin Shuang blinked and regained his senses, looking towards the spot where the black dot was. He slowly widened his eyes and said, "Lie down." The other classmates were startled by her sound and looked at her, then shifted their gaze to where she was looking. Black was constantly expanding and occupying a piece of the sky, with a few flickering purple lightning rays inside. The other classmates widened their eyes and said, "Damn it. What's that? Is it the end of the world?" Lin Shuang picked up his phone and took a photo. "I don't know, maybe it's really, what is this thing? It looks so surreal." The well-connected classmate answered, and he also took out his phone to take a photo. Lin Shuang's whole body stiffened, and in an instant, his hair stood up. He couldn't help but think that he had a sense of foreboding. Pills, my life is at rest. As expected, it turned dark in front of her. By the time the light appeared, she had already appeared on a playground with a few people by her side. She silently swallowed her saliva, took a small step back, and cautiously looked at the 3 men beside her. Her mind drifted for a moment. What does that mean? I'm just a woman, lonely and a bit excessive. In the real world, people are already in a state of panic. The country discovered several people missing at the first time, discussed for a moment, and quickly issued orders to everyone to stay in place and prohibit traffic congestion. Government units and schools immediately counted the number of missing people and information, and school leaders immediately ordered class teachers to quickly count the number of missing people in their classes. Lin Shuang's class is still lively and bustling, and I don't know what happened. Only the students in the hallway were shocked for 10,000 years. All students quickly returned to class, roll call. The teacher received a call and quickly called the students back to class. The class committee also helped to call the students back. Many people are a bit puzzled. What's the situation? What's wrong? I also want to see the vortex outside. Yes, it's amazing. It really looks like an alien invasion. Call the roll first, we'll talk later. The teacher hurriedly began to call the roll. Xing Sr. arrive. Li Yan. Arrive. Lin Shuang. No one answered, and classmates who had a good relationship with Lin Shuang turned their heads to look for her. The teacher's face stiffened and he said, Lin Shuang. Teacher, Lin Shuang was still in the hallway just now. Will he go to the restroom? A classmate in the hallway replied to the teacher. Then the next one. Chen Wenwen. Arrive. After calling the roll, only Lin Shuang was missing. The teacher's slightly solemn face also relaxed. Which class committee member should go to the restroom to find Lin Shuang? Also, use your phone to contact him. Lin Shuang's roommate stood up and prepared to go out and search. A classmate with good relationships also messaged and called Lin Shuang. But without exception, no one answered. The homeroom teacher rushed slowly and finally arrived at the classroom where the class was taking place. Teacher Zheng, are there any classmates who are not here? Yes, Lin Shuang, but I'm not sure if it's in the restroom. I've already asked my classmates to go out and look for it. The teacher greeted him with a somewhat serious expression. As a school teacher, I naturally knew about the disappearance of someone and knew the seriousness of the situation. When the homeroom teacher heard this, her mind went buzzing and she felt a bit dizzy, but the situation didn't allow her to faint. I'll give her a call. She said. The classmates in the class looked at them strangely and gradually realized something was wrong. The classmate standing next to Lin Shuang hesitated and said, but it seems like I didn't see Lin Shuang leave. What? The teacher with sharp ears turned pale upon hearing these words. Teacher Lin Shuang. The homeroom teacher on this side listened to the unmanned prompt ringing in the earpiece, feeling cold all over. However, she knew that this matter must be reported immediately. Although she didn't know what the situation was, everyone saw today's sky, which was eerie and unusual, with some people missing. It was estimated that there was already a stir going on. Sure enough, some well-informed classmates have seen the videos posted online, with countless people sharing them and commenting below. Did you also see them? And I heard that someone is missing. What's the situation? What happened? Is this fake? Go out and look up at the sky. This is real. It's not a drill, it's not a special effect. The official statement was soon issued. Please do not worry too much. We are doing our best to resolve this matter. Please rest assured. Do not believe rumors, do not spread them. Turning back to Lin Shuang's side, she looked at three men. One had dog eyes and was very delicate, about 1.8 meters long. One was wearing glasses and had straight facial features, looking up and down, while the other frowned and looked a bit fierce, about 1.8 meters. Lin Shuang silently estimated the probability of her surviving against these people in her heart, 1.1, with a probability of 28 points. They were doomed to die. 3-on-1, Lin Shuang couldn't help but shed tears, and she was doomed to die. Hope is not an enemy. When Lin Shuang looked at them, they were also looking at each other, both a bit confused and cautious. Lin Shuang silently withdrew his hand, standing still and trying to reduce his sense of presence. TSK, what kind of ghost is this? Why is it so similar to the opening of the Infinite game? There should be a system playing, right? What is the situation? The system is rushing. Welcome to the survival game. You are the first batch of players to enter the survival game. In order to ensure fairness and balance, the first batch of players to enter the survival game enjoy life protection once. The game is in live mode, and privacy will be protected by full-screen coding. As players are entering the game for the first time, the rules of the first game are declared by the system, and subsequent game rules are discovered by players themselves. The first game is about campus education. Rule 1. Players need to maintain their identity and personality. Rule 2. Behaviors that conform to the campus. Reminder. Shade and avoid the cool, flowers falling in the spring mud. Life protection once, isn't it like killing twice? Assassination is more appropriate. Lin Shuang felt a bit helpless. There was actually a life protection frequency, but is it fair and balanced? It's a bit interesting, and there are also rules and personal identities. Even this prompt is very interesting. Although Lin Shuang's thoughts were wandering in his mind, his face remained calm and he only pretended to be afraid, looking timidly at the three of them whose faces had turned pale due to fear. The people who entered the game here heard this explanation, and if they heard bad news, they would instantly scream and even curse loudly. At the moment when the system spoke out, the outside sky suddenly changed, with a vortex hanging in the sky, forming a whole large screen. The screen was divided into grids, each containing the figures of the players entering the game. Everyone heard these words and a riot erupted in an instant, with constant screams and increasingly loud curses. Perhaps the sound was too loud, and the system's icy voice rang out again. Please accept reality, no matter where you go, you cannot escape the game. Do not increase casualties. Please ensure the normal operation of the world, leaders. All creatures that have opened their minds will enter the survival game. In order to ensure survival rate, the game has launched a live broadcast mode. Please watch carefully and learn from your experience and lessons. Live streaming can be connected to electronic devices. Simply place the electronic devices to be broadcasted on the open surface, and the live stream can be broadcasted. Players are not allowed to watch the live stream during the game. Sigh, it's interesting. But everyone wants it, then. Forget it. Lin Shuang's thoughts surged, but his expression remained unchanged. The man wearing glasses spoke up first, since the system has also said that we should accept reality. As players, we should accept reality even more. Let's introduce ourselves first. My name is Zhang Weiyu. Zhang Wei, and, this name sounds so strange. Do you want a pseudonym later? Where do we go to see our identity? If anyone knows, a pseudonym is not appropriate. Anyway, this name is quite mediocre. Let's start with the real name. Lin Shuangrua pondered, it's a pity that there aren't enough clues. The man with a slightly fierce face also spoke up, my name is Ning Bin. Why did we make the first batch of this game first? It's unlucky. The man with dog eyes turned his head to look at Lin Shuang and smiled, ladies first, please introduce yourself first. Okay, my name is Lin Shuang. Lin Shuang's voice softened with a hint of sobbing. The man with dog eyes glanced at Lin Shuang before saying, my name is Wu Xie. Lin Shuang's expression paused, and he looked up at Wu Xie seriously. Oh, this shouldn't be the main Tomb Raider, right? Chapter 2. Campus Shadows 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wu Xie felt her gaze and gave her a slight smile. It is much calmer and more sensitive than others, with a probability of increasing to 50% to be a true leader. Although it is not ruled out that some people in the real world also call this name. We still need to give it a try. Lin Shuang also smiled at him and slowly moved to his side. If it was the main leader, it was unknown whether it was Wu Xie from a certain time or Wu Xie from a parallel time and space. Is this a hodgepodge of the world? Wu Xie looked at the girl who had moved to his side, and his thoughts turned a few times. Lin Shuang seemed very scared, but apart from his expression of fear, he was much calmer than most people who encounter danger. Fear should be a facade, and he was a more troublesome person than the other two. And she is very sensitive to my name, so she probably knows me or this name. It's this survival game. It sounds a bit scientific, but it's playing metaphysics. I'm not involved in this aspect myself. Lin Shuang stretched out 2 fingers, gently pulling at Wu Xie's clothes, lowered his eyes, and pondered whether the characters from the world in the book appeared in the survival game, referring to the small world that had already formed. Plus, all creatures that have activated spiritual intelligence will participate, which is even more interesting. It seems that this Wu Xie is most likely Wu Xie from the Tomb Raider. Where should I go to claim my identity? The other two watched as Lin Shuang walked towards Wu Xie, without speaking, but with a hint of contempt in their eyes. Zhang Wei spoke up and said, "There are 2 rules. The first one is identity. In terms of campus, we are nothing more than teachers and students, but where should we go to obtain this identity?" Ningbin frowned and said, "It's very likely that it was obtained through NPC's communication." After a moment of contemplation, Wu Xie wondered if there was another type of person in the game besides players, who was actually called an NPC. It should be like this. Nowadays, we are on the playground and there are students around us, which may be due to their identity. Lin Shuang did not speak, and now that the possibility of the other 3 being enemies has been ruled out, her attention is no longer focused on them. She looked around carefully, and the place with their backs to each other was the gate, while the hallway of the playground and the building ahead were filled with students. The playground is equipped with some pitted silicone tracks, visually only 200 meters long. Inside, there are basketball and football fields, and the opposite building and surrounding roads are somewhat old, with even cracks on the ground. If the game is not randomly placed, it is highly likely that it has just entered the school gate, with the identity of a teacher, students who have taken leave and are late, parents, and leaders. If it's a student, it's impossible to have all 4 of them together at once. Parents, it's even more impossible. Most of the people we see now are wearing school uniforms, and we haven't seen anyone wearing other clothes. As the leader said, the school has already sent teachers to take over early. How could we possibly stand for this half day? There is only 1 teacher left, and there are 4 teachers at once. In high school, there is no other choice except for the new teacher who comes to report on time. New report, there should be records available. I'm not sure what the name is, whether it's the original name or another name. Lin Shuang withdrew his gaze and looked up at Wu Xie, coinciding with the gaze that Wu Xie looked down at. Lin Shuang smiled obediently. Wu Xie was amused in her heart, but now she needs to pretend again. The way she looked around just now doesn't hide it at all. Zhang Wei and Zhe never went to Lin Shuang at all. He quite agreed with Wu Xie's words, "I think so too, but if it's a student, where is our classroom?" Ningbin was a bit annoyed and said, "There must be some classmates. We'll just wait for them to come and call us." Lin Shuang pretended to be obedient and remained silent. Wu Xie didn't speak anymore, just nodded. Before Zhang Wei could say anything more, a person without a school uniform ran from a distance, and the 4 of them looked at him together. It was estimated that this person was here to send them their identities. Sure enough, in no time, the person ran closer and said, "For teachers, I'm so sorry for the delay just now, which caused you to wait so long. I'm He, the teaching director of Chunin Middle School." He breathed a sigh of relief and said, "As for your new teacher, the dormitories are separated and each person is in an independent room. As for the courses you teach, Zhang Wei and the teacher are in mathematics, Ningbin is in physical education, Wu Xie is in English, and Lin Shuang is in Chinese. The schedule is posted in the dormitories, teaching 2 classes, Class 7 and Class 8, respectively." Lin Shuangmei raised his eyebrows and exclaimed, "Wow, Chinese is great. Chinese is so enjoyable. The other few people didn't have any emotional fluctuations either, so it's probably a coincidence that they happened to have a special talent. Perhaps it was He's gentle attitude that slowly calmed the hearts of several people who were a bit nervous about the unknown. It seems that games are not meant to kill people, they should be an exaggeration of the system. Zhang Wei and Chong He smiled and said, Teacher He, should we first familiarize ourselves with the dormitory or start teaching? Ningbin also spoke up, does Teacher He have a map of the school? Wu Xia also smiled and said, we still need to work hard, Teacher He, to give us a list of students. Lin Shuang was satisfied in his heart and it was indeed a pleasure to cooperate with smart people. Teacher He, do you have any materials from school teachers and leaders? It would be embarrassing if we didn't meet the teachers in the office. Zhang Wei and others were a bit surprised to take a glance at Lin Shuang, who was quite clever and not so useless, unlike a daughter flower. He was taken aback and said, yes, I need to give it to you. The teaching building for the second year of high school is right in front of the first building that turns right in front of your dormitory. The office is on the second floor next to the teaching building for the second year of high school, but the teachers for different subjects are separate. Zhang Wei smiled and thank you, Teacher He, for helping to introduce. He quickly shook his hand and said, it's okay. Come with me. Lin Shuang clicked a few times in his heart and didn't say anything. Wu Xia took a few steps forward and followed He half a step, smiling and getting in touch. Teacher He, thank you for coming all this way. Does Teacher He live at school? I'll invite Teacher He out for a meal another day. He's eyes relaxed and he said, I live in the teacher's dormitory of the school. The school teachers all live in the teacher's dormitory, so there's no need to invite me out for a meal. It's my job to come and pick you up. Wu Xia said with a hint of regret, then I'll go find you another day to have tea and ask how to teach better. He also smiled and said, welcome to the extreme. I have been teaching for 40 years, and there is still some experience that I can tell you. Wu Xia smiled even brighter and said, thank you Teacher He first. He waved his hand with a smile and said, hey, if you're willing to listen, it's all for teaching and nurturing. Zhang Wei leaned over and said, Teacher He, I also want to ask for some advice, can I? Ningbin also said, I also want to. He narrowed his eyes with a smile and said, of course we can, everyone is very welcome. Thank you, Teacher He, for being willing to give it your all. Lin Shuang remained silent throughout the journey, just following quietly with a particularly low sense of presence. As a few people approached, a building with walls covered in moss came into view. The building is a bit dilapidated, and even more so compared to the teaching building across from it. Lin Shuang has already started to dislike it. Shouldn't he still be baptized by dust if he goes in? Is this building really not going to collapse? Here we are, this is the teacher's dormitory. Your dormitory is on the second floor, 204. He stopped his steps. I won't take you inside anymore. Everything is stored in the dormitory. If there is anything missing, you'll have to work hard to arrange it yourself. Okay, thank you for taking a trip, Teacher He, Zhang Wei said with a smile. It's my job. I shouldn't have to work hard, He waved his hand with a smile. Then I'll go back first. There's still something to solve. Then Teacher He, hurry up and get busy. Business is important, we can tidy up on our own. Wu Xia smiled and leaned slightly. Yes, business matters. Teacher He, go ahead quickly. Ningbin agreed. Okay. If you have anything to do, you can go to the Academic Affairs office to find me. By the way, that information and map, your dormitory has a dedicated computer and account for work. I will send it to that account later, you remember to keep it. He didn't stop, glanced at Lin Shuang with some unclear meaning, turned around, and hurriedly left. Lin Shuang still pulled on Wu Xia's sleeve and watched He leave with a standard smile. What kind of shabby dormitory number is this? What kind of floor is it? Don't you know if it's unlucky? Have you really never been haunted before? But how should ghosts be defeated? There was a pulling force in his hand, and Lin Shuang turned around to see that the other three were already moving forward. Wu Xie felt a tug on his clothes and turned around. As expected, Lin Shuang tugged at his clothes and looked at him with a smile. What's going on? Wu Xie felt a bit strange. Although Lin Shuang was a bit strange on his body, he didn't reveal it too clearly. How could he suddenly become so prominent now? It's okay, it's just that I'm scared. You walk slowly, wait for me. Lin Shuang saw the other two people turn around and blinked, soaking a layer of water in his eyes. Zhang Wei and He Ningbin silently averted their gaze. Zhang Weihe couldn't help but speak, Wu Xie, don't spoil her. It's not dangerous, there's nothing to be afraid of. Ningbin didn't say anything, just sneered coldly. He didn't want to pay attention anymore and walked towards the building with a heavy head. I thought I was smart, but in the end, forget it, girl. If you're afraid, just be afraid. Wu Xie retorted, so much has happened today, even the environment has changed, and it's normal for her to be afraid just because she's a girl. Zhang Wei was taken aback for a moment, but he didn't expect it. That's right. Let's go to the dormitory first, then you can support it. Lin Shuang was also a bit surprised. She didn't expect that these people were quite good and thought they would be scolded. It seems that these people are not only calm enough, but also capable and intelligent. I hope they can still maintain their original intentions in the future. After all, how could survival games be so easy? At this point, she dodged behind Wu Xie and smiled at Zhang Wei. But Zhang Weihe had already turned back and walked into the building without seeing it. Lin Shuang withdrew his smile uninteresting and looked at Wu Xie as he turned around. He smiled lightly and said, Wu Xie, come in your ear. Wu Xie looked at Lin Shuang with a hint of vigilance, but slowly lowered her head, turned her head, and slightly leaned her ear closer. You tell me, she said. Lin Shuang looked at the distance of at least one palm, satisfied, sensible, and vigilant. If it was the main leader, it should be Wu Xie behind the underwater tomb. Can you accompany me to the bathroom later? Wu Xie looked up and looked at her in shock, isn't this convenient? Lin Shuang's smile stiffened as he said, it must be given to me. It cannot be refuted. What kind of brain circuit is this? However, this sentence seems a bit ambiguous. Regardless, it must be a pile of waste in Wu Xie's mind. Wu Xie also realized that there should be something to say. Although he didn't understand why it couldn't be said here, he still respected because Lin Shuang did seem to know something. Chapter 3. Campus Shadows 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lin Shuang tugged at Wu Xie's clothes and looked at the slightly dim and dirty corridor. However, in the atmosphere of terror, the most fortunate thing was that facing the door was the staircase, so there was no need to walk inside. If there was a danger, he would run faster. But Lin Shuang still felt a bit disgusted. He shook his body and shook off the goosebumps. If it weren't for the presence of Wu Xie, I wouldn't have dared to stay longer. It was gloomy and terrifying. But next time, it's better to take a look at the environment first before making a sound. If there really is, oh, it's a mistake. Wu Xie also saw Lin Shuang's trembling body, but found something that a girl should be afraid of when she sees something eerie. She just calmed down and said, let's go. Lin Shuang was a bit unhappy. Wu Xie, is there a switch for hallway lights near here? The school shouldn't be so poor, can't even turn on the lights. Wu Xie found the switch on the other side of the gate with the good gaze she had developed in the tomb. It should be that one, she said. He hesitated for a moment before taking the initiative to speak, I'll go drive. Lin Shuang pulled at the corner of his clothes and followed step by step. Wu Xia also allowed her to tug at his clothes and pressed the switch with a snap. The corridor lit up instantly, and Lin Shuang's expression relaxed a bit. "Thank you, you're so kind." Without hesitation, a good person card was issued. "It's okay, can we leave now?" Wu Xia couldn't help but laugh and cry, as she rarely encountered such girls. She had encountered women like Anning who were not inferior to men before, or noble and reserved like Hu Xiuxiu. Although it has become somewhat disconnected from normal society, I still do not regret following Uncle San. In the real world, Lin Shuang's sister Lin Fei also heard this cold statement and quickly called her parents, calling out to her younger siblings in the family group. After calling her parents, the family was safe and sound, and no one was missing in the village. The other members of the family group had all returned, except for Lin Shuang. Lin Fei frowned and realized that Lin Shuang was the most addicted to mobile phones. Why hasn't he returned yet? It should be something that happened. Let's call and ask. The phone rang several times, but still couldn't be dialed. Lin Fei's face changed and she said, "It's impossible, isn't it? So coincidental. So unlucky." Quickly, an unanswered prompt came from the other end of the phone, and Lin Fei broke out in a cold sweat. Trembling, she opened her computer and placed it on the desktop, put her phone in her pocket, and connected to the live broadcast. With a sense of luck in mind, I zoomed in on the windows one by one and found that Lin Shuang had not been seen yet. It should be that Lin Shuang had something to do and didn't look at his phone. It shouldn't have been so unlucky. But this luck was quickly shattered, and the person displayed in the live broadcast window in front of me was clearly Lin Shuang. Even if it's her back, she won't be mistaken, it's her. In the camera, Lin Shuang pulled a man's clothes and walked side by side, slowly ascending the stairs. Lin Fei looked at this scene incredulously. No matter what she thought, she was powerless to turn the tide. Lin Shuangzhen was indeed selected as the first batch of players. How could it be? How could it be so unlucky? Lin Fei collapsed on the chair. But she has a somewhat introverted personality and does not directly expose the fact that people she knows have been selected. Before knowing whether this matter is a blessing or a curse, she is afraid that saying the wrong word will cause difficult consequences to reverse. Fortunately, her colleagues around her were all clamoring and no one heard what she said. She managed to calm down and messaged her younger siblings, asking them not to reveal that Lin Shuang had become a player. In the world of tomb raids, after a period of panic, everyone barely calmed down. As for electronic devices, survival games directly distributed a virtual projection device to each person for watching live broadcasts. Wu Erbai quickly suppressed some of the rioting subordinates and asked Jing to call Wu Xia and the old house. Jing was the first to call the old house and confirmed that everything was okay before calling Wu Xia. It rang for a long time but no one answered. Jing frowned and called Wu Shanju. "Wang Meng, is Wu Xia there?" Fortunately, the phone was answered. "Ah. Boss. Boss. Boss." Wang Meng muttered a bit strangely, "Strange, can't the boss hear my shout?" Yi, Xiao Sanyi may have been selected as a player, said Jing with a cold expression. Wu Erbai, who had just ordered his subordinates to check which people he knew in the live broadcast, trembled and said, "Are you sure?" Jing quickly searched for the live broadcast footage and, as expected, saw Wu Xia. "Yes, second master, look." Wu Erbai carefully looked at Wu Xia, and currently did not see any signs of injury. However, it was just the beginning, how could it be injured? But what is the situation with the girl who leaned in, doesn't she know Wu Xia? Wu Erbai looked at it for a while and said, Jing, go check that girl." Jing nodded and said, "Yes. Second master." Wu Sanqing, who was hiding elsewhere, also opened the live broadcast and looked over one by one. Suddenly, his hand stopped and he said, "Why was this little rabbit selected?" Wu Sanqing's face was a bit ugly. Halfway through the plan, the core of the plan ran away and still entered such a dangerous place. It was like a weak calf, unable to move up or down in one breath. Zhang Qiling, who was lying in his black glasses home, also saw Wu Xia and frowned as he watched her live broadcast. Black glasses came out of the room and rubbed against Zhang Qiling, saying, "Oh, mute, look, who did I see? Little third master, no one's lucky anymore. Isn't that right? Mute." Zhang Qiling spoke with a warning, blind. "Okay, good luck. It's just this plan, I'm afraid it's going to end prematurely." Black glasses gloated as he watched the live broadcast. "At present, I have only seen Wu Xia enter, and none of the others. TSK, you said this third master must be extremely anxious." Suddenly, there were no people left, and we couldn't even find someone to protect him. Zhang Qiling watched the live broadcast without making a sound. Black glasses didn't feel ignored, still smiling and wanting to be beaten. Jia Yuchen also saw Wu Xia, although he didn't know what was going on, he still wanted to marvel at the strength of Wu Xia's evil sect. The bad things happened, and even the number of life protection times came out, which means he would be threatened with life. It was still an unfamiliar place, and the level of danger soared sharply this time. Hua Xiuxiu was very worried. Brother Wu Xia shouldn't be okay, right? After all, Brother Wu Xia is also very smart. Wang Fatty also saw it and said, "Wow, this day is becoming more and more cult." But in this survival game, without Fatty Lord, what should innocent people do? Other people who know Wu Xia also saw her and couldn't help but sigh, "This cult. I couldn't help but feel grateful that it wasn't me." Hey, mute, you see, Wu Xia has a romantic luck and immediately hooked up with the only little girl. His black glasses touched his chin. This little girl is a bit complicated, and I don't know if Wu Xia can handle it. Black glasses nudged Zhang Qiling and said, "But mute, did you notice? This little girl seems to be familiar with the name Wu Xia. Shouldn't she be a fan of Wu Xia?" Black glasses became a bit unhappy as he spoke. Why do people like Wu Xia have fans? Black Lord is so charming, and even those with super strength don't have fans. Zhang Qiling didn't even lift his head, even stingy enough to give his black glasses some extra light. "The clothes are not right," he said. Those two men. Black glasses responded casually, "It seems a bit interesting, isn't there any different world?" After black glasses finished speaking, he smiled first and said, "It's better to say that some ancient tribe has emerged. But the materials of these clothes are indeed different. Is it unique to any place?" Zhang Qiling remained silent and was just earnestly searching for memory, but unfortunately, he did not find any information about this material. Black glasses also became serious. "Is it something synthesized? If not, then it's even more interesting." "It's so interesting, I don't know when I can go in and take a look, Black Master," he said with a smile as he touched his chin. Zhang Qiling gave him a faint glance and said, "Danger." Black glasses casually found a lounge chair to lie down and said, "I can't die, mute. Could you please protect me?" "Not necessarily," Zhang Qiling said without turning his head. Black glasses laughed even more arrogantly. "After being blind in the south and mute in the north for so many years, I don't believe that entering a game can still separate us." Zhang Qiling gave a painful blow and said, "My price is twice as high." Black glasses sat up abruptly and said, "Can't you not mention this matter?" "Don't mention it, we are still good friends." Zhang Qiling remained silent. Black glasses groaned and lay down again. Seeing Wu Xia turn on the light, his black glasses couldn't help but sigh. Wu Xia is too sincere, isn't he? Isn't he being used as a gun? It's still naive. Zhang Qiling also disagreed a bit. The chubby man looked at the two people walking back and forth, pondering, why did innocent turn a girl again? No, this girl doesn't look right. Oh, why has it been so long, innocent is still so innocent. Jia Yuchen was also somewhat speechless, Wu Xia is really not on guard. But if Wu Xia hears about it, he won't be convinced anymore. What does it mean that I don't set up defenses? I have always been vigilant, okay. And now my skills are also good, just like Lin Shuang, he can still play. Anning couldn't help but shake her head and said, it's still like this. Jude Cao suddenly spoke up, Anning, the plan to go to the West Queen Mother's palace has come to a halt. Anning was puzzled and said, why, boss? Jude looked at Wu Xia on the screen with a heavy expression and said, it's no use. Wu Xia is not even here. Going to the West Queen Mother's palace is equivalent to going for nothing. What does this have to do with Wu Xia? Anning didn't understand and was confused. Jude Cao's tone was bleak. His role is significant. Stop all plans, isn't this game just a breakthrough point? Instead of constantly searching for elixirs of immortality that may even have side effects, this game can provide us with more than just immortality. Anning is confused. She has a deep understanding of how persistent the boss is about the elixir of immortality. Moreover, in recent years, his physical condition has been deteriorating day by day. How could he possibly stop just by saying so, and all plans have been stopped? Jude squinted his eyes as he scrutinized this live broadcast, far beyond the current level of technology, able to quietly take away so many people, and even issue a warning directly to himself. Chapter 4. Campus Shadows 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wu San's expression was uncertain when he woke up. Wu Xia was not there, and all plans were forced to pause. With the enemy still present, an unknown game emerged, and time was running out. Wu San woke up with a stern expression, no big deal, fish die and the net is broken. Without Wu Xia, they wouldn't be able to handle it. Wu Erbai was surprised and said, what did you say? I couldn't find it. Jing lowered his head a bit ashamed and said, yes, second master, we haven't found any information about this girl. Wu Erbai pondered deeply, it's okay, then why can't you find it? Jing hesitated a bit and said, maybe it's a hermit, or someone has interfered with us. Wu Erbai thought for a moment and said, it's possible, keep investigating. And those two men are also here. The survival game sensed the world and, it's great. Keep it as it is, all main storyline plans are suspended. Once it was confirmed that there would be no problems, the survival game stopped paying attention to this small world and instead was attracted by Lin Shuang and the others. Among all the teams, only a few of them remained calm and fast, and all teams were like this. It is truly true that they were arranged according to their strength, and this team has the highest strength. Lin Shuang happily pulled Wu Xia's hem up the stairs and said, Wu Xia, how do you think this live broadcast is going to be broadcast? Are you switching to a different location for live broadcast? Wu Xia looked confused and said, does live streaming refer to playing videos? Lin Shuang also realized that if it were Wu Xia from the tomb robbing world, he really didn't know what live streaming was. It's just real-time playback. What we do will be directly displayed on the screen, which is like, countless people watching you live through the machine. Wu Xia understood and said, it sounds a bit scary. Lin Shuang fantasized about the scene for a moment and frowned, that's right, it's very scary. But they're far away from us, it's a small problem. Wu Xia smiled and said, indeed. We're here. Lin Shuang grabbed Wu Xia and said, let's take a look at the environment first. Wu Xia stopped in coordination and looked at the dormitory building. The arrangement of the second-floor dormitories is like a hotel, with 2 rows of dormitories facing each other, and dormitory numbers pasted on the door. The corridor on the second floor is brighter than the first floor, but I don't know if the light tubes haven't been wiped for too long. The illuminated light is dim, and there are a lot of graffiti on the walls, which looks like children scribbling on it. The floor is actually very clean, without any garbage residue. Even the doors are new anti-theft doors, with wooden doors inside. The door number is hanging well on the door, looking brand new. Everything looks normal, there's nothing wrong with it. Lin Shuang felt his cold hair stand up and said, how could it be so clean? Wu Xie also felt a bit strange. Perhaps it was because the new teacher was coming that he specially cleaned up. Lin Shuang had already pulled Wu Xie's wrist and said solemnly, how could it be? Let's go and see the window at the end of the corridor. The end of the corridor was very close to the staircase, and Wu Xie and Lin Shuang walked cautiously over. Did you see it clearly? Wu Xie couldn't believe it. You see clearly, the windows and sills are all covered in dust and dirt. Shouldn't you think the corridor windows don't matter and don't need to be cleaned? Lin Shuang silently pinched Wu Xie's wrist and said, stupid, many dormitories and schools don't actually have to replace all the doors with a big shot because it's too inspiring. And when you look at this building, it looks like it's been built for a long time. Don't tell me that the door and anti-theft door were only recently replaced. This probability is like finding a needle in a haystack, let alone where is this survival game. How could it have been so clever all along? Wu Xie fell silent. Black Glasses began to giggle and said, mute, this little girl has a good sense of crisis. You see, Wu Xie is still defending her. Ha ha ha. Zhang Qiling's expression had already become solemn. Wu Xie has no reason not to see these, this is a test for Lin Shuang. I hope there won't be any problems. Wu Sanqing and Wu Erbai also saw it and looked at the boy pretending to be silly on the screen with great satisfaction. The chubby man became anxious and said, what's going on these days? Didn't you be quite smart before? Why can't your mind turn now? Although Hu Xiuxiu didn't understand, she also felt that the overall environment looked very eerie. After a slight thought, Jia Yuchen understood their meaning. Anning and Jude were also contemplating the exam. Lin Shuang instructed Wu Xie, remember the patterns of those dirty and non-dirty places. Once you remember them, we'll go to the dormitory. Wu Xie nodded and began to memorize carefully, although he didn't understand why. I've memorized it, he said. Lin Shuang nodded and said, okay, let's go then. Remember to go to the bathroom with me later. Wu Xie's face was a bit strange. Although she knew what she was going to do, it sounded strange. Okay, she said. Lin glanced at Wu Xie with both sides of his head and hesitated at first whether to tell her or not, but his damn curiosity still prevailed. In the end, he walked forward without saying anything. Arriving at the entrance of dormitory 204, Lin Shuang stopped and reached out to touch the doorplate. She was a complete individual, pulled but not pulled, welded tightly. She turned to the next dormitory thoughtfully. Wu Xie volunteered, I'll come. Lin Shuang's eyes flickered for a moment. Lin Shuang continued to hold on to Wu Xie's wrist and follow, how about that? Wu Xie tugged at the doorplate again and said, it's very sticky. Lin Shuang squinted his eyes and thought for a moment, let's go back to the dormitory. Okay. Wu Xie first pushed open the dormitory door of 204, while the other two were already waiting for them in the living room. The arrangement of the living room is also a bit strange. In front of the sofa is a coffee table, which is empty. In front of the coffee table is a TV, with a picture hanging on it and a computer next to it. The computer is on. On the back of the sofa, there is a mirror that looks like a full-body mirror, but its distance from the sofa is enough to fully reflect the sofa. On the right side of the mirror is a cabinet, on which there is a vase with several withered flowers inserted crookedly. On the left side of the mirror, there is a piece of paper attached, which should be the curriculum. Ningbin spoke in a bad tone, why did you come back so slowly? Let's talk about love. Convergence point. This is the game. Zhang Wei and King Piapo glanced at him. Ningbin instantly shut up. Wu Xie smiled and said, I. Lin Shuang interrupted him directly, I don't like people talking to me so aggressively, especially now that they are still in the game. If you want to team up, control your temper. If you don't team up, then shut up. Ningbin frowned, but didn't say anything. Zhang Weihua looked at her in surprise. Is this her original temper, or is she backed by someone so arrogant? Wu Xie was also surprised. Didn't Lin Shuang pretend well before? Why did you suddenly stop pretending? Black Glasses was also surprised. Mute, do you think this little girl is starting to become arrogant after knowing something? Zhang Qiling pondered and said, no, she doesn't have a good temperament herself. Black Glasses exclaimed, so where does she have the strength to challenge a man who looks much stronger than her? Zhang Qiling didn't answer again. Black Glasses are a meaningful smile. Others were also surprised to see this, but they had seen too many people and didn't pay much attention. Lin Fei in the real world was a bit surprised. She didn't know that her sister was such a domineering person. In the real world, the country has already noticed their team, the most calm team, while others are still introducing themselves in confusion. They are already in the dormitory. Upon hearing Lin Shuang's words, someone in the personality testing and analysis department carefully added 2 sentences after liking to dress up as delicate and pitiful. They couldn't hear anyone say anything more serious and had a bad temper. After Lin Shuang finished speaking, he pulled Wu Xie towards an unopened room. As soon as he entered, the right side was the bed, while the left side was empty. Lin Shuang carefully checked the room. It was clean, very clean, too clean, not even a trace of dust was detected, and other necessary items were also present. Lin Shuang pulled open the bedside with a displeased expression and looked at the very new cabinet, which was empty inside. Then he looked at the wardrobe across from the bed, which was an old wooden cabinet. She pulled Wu Xie over and opened the door of the wardrobe to her side. Inside, it was quiet, with only a few sets of regular clothes inside. Lin Shuang took out a set and gestured on it, and the size matched. Lin Shuang was a bit happy. Surprisingly, they even gave away clothing, but this style is a bit ugly. It's a uniform black sportswear. Lin Shuang stuffed his clothes back and said, forget it, I won't wear them anymore. Wu Xie doesn't understand, but it's also difficult to speak up. Lin Shuang glanced at him and said, I don't know how it formulates rules in the game, but there must be more than just those 2 rules, there are many potential rules, it's just not explicitly stated. Wu Xie was a bit shocked. Are you saying that this dress could also be a rule? Lin Shuang casually replied, I don't know, but just in case, I think it's just the first level and shouldn't be. Wu Xie was confused. This game was a bit high-end, but it's not impossible not to change clothes. When she went to the grave, her clothes were dirty and sometimes they couldn't be changed. Black Glasses and Zhang Qiling were not much surprised. The expression on the Black Glasses had switched back to a thief-like expression. This little girl is actually very vigilant in every household, and I don't know who cultivated it, he said. Zhang Qiling continued to be lazy to pay attention to him. Jia Yuchen was only shocked and then relieved. There were many strange things in the tomb, and there were more strange traps. The clothes were just like traps when converted. Hu Xiuxiu was just as shocked as Wu Xie, how could clothes be? But after thinking about it, she realized that the appearance of this game was already quite surprising, not much more. Anning and Ju didn't have much impact on the exam, let alone the 3 members of the Wu family. In the world of tomb raiding, it is quite lively. Currently, everyone knows only Wu Xie, who is crowded in her live broadcast room to watch. Hearing this sentence is truly amazing. However, there are also big shots who remain motionless and are paying attention to Lin Shuang. In their eyes, Lin Shuang is much more vigilant than Wu Xie. Observers from the real world immediately reported to their superiors, boss, Lin Shuang said that clothing may also be a rule. The superior walked over and said, please repeat Lin Shuang's original words. Observer, I don't know how it formulates rules in the game, but there are definitely more than those 2 rules, there are many potential rules, but it's just not explicitly stated. I don't know, but just in case, but I think it's just the first level, so it shouldn't be too late. Report over. The superior pondered for a moment and said, still recording, right? Remember not to interrupt the machine. I'm not sure if there's a live broadcast replay. Everyone should record it, and there shouldn't be any omissions. The observer held his head high and said, yes. Head. The superior patted the observer's shoulder and hurriedly went to find the leader. Chapter 5. Campus Shadows 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The observer quickly went to check the device that was recording the screen. It was great, not a single device was disconnected. The superior arrived at the conference room, and all the leaders are still in a meeting. Report. Enter. The leader sat at the top. What's the situation? He came over so urgently. The superior bowed and repeated Lin Shuang's words in detail. If it's true, then Lin Shuang may need to increase his importance. The leader pondered for a moment and said, yes, whether it's true or false, let those researchers carefully study it again and strive for some constructive opinions. The superior saluted with a snap and said, yes. The leader nodded and said, let's go. The other leaders remained calm and waited for their superiors to leave before raising doubts. Why do we need to improve? Although Lin Shuang is calm enough, clothes are the rules, isn't that a bit absurd? Yeah, and there are so many people who have performed well. Those people have shown average performance, but they still lack exercise. Do you think which ones are very cautious now? The silence of the others was quite real. At first, they were very afraid and at least very vigilant. However, since he appeared, he had moved forward and backward with moderation, politeness, and politeness. In an instant, his courage grew stronger, without the vigilance of Lin Shuang and his team. At this moment, Lin Shuang had no idea what had happened. Even if he knew about her, he didn't care. She didn't have much value. Lin Shuang looked at the slightly empty room, pondered for a moment, didn't say anything, just turned his head to look at the bathroom. The bathroom and bathroom are together, and she took a careful look. There was a squatting pit, a wash basin, and a bathtub, which looked fine and clean. Lin Shuang looked at the bathtub with a gloomy gaze. The bathtub that was most prone to accidents was openly placed in front of me, but there was no water heater, which was not at all humane. She sighed and said, privacy, that should be. It's quite a bit of a bug. She's been brainstorming about the survival game. Hello, the system, is it there? Can I talk to you about some uncertain places? What's going on? The cold voice of the system echoed in her mind. What you're saying is not very clear. Where does the scope of privacy refer to? Lin Shuang pouted. Privacy refers to normal physiological needs such as toileting, bathing, sexual desire, and other behaviors. Lin Shuang playfully raised his hand in his mind and asked, but in our opinion, privacy refers to private matters that we do not want to disclose, personal information in fields related to personal interests. The system continued to remain indifferent, due to uncontrollable factors. If players choose not to expose everything, what is the significance of live streaming? Lin Shuang continued to ask, you guys are quite humanized. So, what is the meaning of your live streaming? To ensure survival rate, learn from lessons and experiences. After our game is over, we should be able to choose not to continue broadcasting to others, right? After all, there is no experience or lesson left to teach. Lin Shuang shrugged innocently. No, the system answered firmly. Really? Let me ask, how do you determine the beginning and end of those privacy behaviors? For example, if you need to go to the bathroom, do you need to take off your pants directly? Will your reaction speed be faster than theirs? And if there are a few people present, will everyone's screen be full screen coded? Lin Shuang continued to ask tirelessly. The outside world was startled when they saw Lin Shuang suddenly stop and remain motionless, and even his gaze had become lifeless. Wu Xie panicked and patted Lin Shuang, Lin Shuang. Lin Shuang. No response received. Black Glasses sat up straight and said, "Mute, what is her state? She's lost in thought, in a daze, or has she been mesmerized?" "I'm not sure," said Zhang Qiling with a slightly solemn expression. Black Glasses clicked and then lay down again. "Poor little third master, you have to face all this alone again." Zhang Qiling no longer wants to comment on his statement. Jia Yuchen and others speculate whether they have been hit. Lin Fei and the others suspected that they might have been blinded by ghosts. If you want to engage in these privacy behaviors, just let me know in advance, and the same goes for the end. As long as a privacy screen appears on the screen, it will be protected by coding. The system was confused for a while before answering, "Yes, how do I make a judgment? I cannot directly read their consciousness." "Oh, really? Can't we follow the privacy range we mentioned after the game ends?" Lin Shuang wanted to negotiate. "No way. The system is once again resolute. Okay, I'll talk to you about some questions about you later. I've been in a daze for a long time now, and it's inevitable that there might be some abnormalities." Lin Shuang was very regretful. She thought this game was very rigid, but she didn't expect it to be very user-friendly. She didn't say anything roundabout, but also, how can such a large system compare to those small games? Lin Shuang withdrew his thoughts and focused his gaze again, only to see Wu Xie's anxious face, as well as his desire to pinch his own hand. "What are you doing? What are you doing?" Lin Shuang tilted his head back and avoided Wu Xie's hand in disgust. "I just called you, you shouldn't." Wu Xie felt a bit aggrieved. Cough, "I suddenly remembered something. I'm sorry, it made you worried." Lin Shuang felt a bit embarrassed. "It's okay, as long as you're okay." Wu Xie shook his head without hesitation. Lin Shuang felt a bit embarrassed. "I'll pay attention next time." Wu Xie smiled and remained silent. Lin Shuang glanced at Wu Xie, sighed inwardly, and turned around to lock the bathroom door. Wu Xie watched her movements and felt a chill and a strange panic behind her. Lin Shuang locked the door and calmly smiled at Wu Xie, saying to the system, "I want to take a shower. Type the code." The system has no emotions, it has been typed in full screen. Lin Shuangchong's system gave a sweet smile and said, "Thank you to the emotional system gentlemen." System. "You're welcome." The Black Glasses of the Tomb Raiding world stared blankly at the full-screen coded scene and said, "Mute, is this so exciting? It's all about getting to the point right from the beginning." Zhang Qiling was also shocked, but Wu Xie and his impression was not of this temperament either. Jia Yuchen looked at the screen of coding and raised an eyebrow helplessly. "Wu Xie, is this too casual?" Hua Xiuxiu was also stunned and couldn't imagine that brother Wu Xie was so unrecognizable, live streaming. "But that little girl is also very lively." Wu Sanqing was also stunned for a moment. "What is this little rabbit doing? That little girl has a problem. Why don't you refuse?" Wu Erbai's eyebrows furrowed as well. "You haven't found it yet." Jing looked at the mosaic on the screen, feeling a bit dazed. "Are the little girls now so bold?" "No, second master." Wu Erbai was lost in thought. Could it be some kind of demon that opened up spiritual intelligence? Lin Fei in the real world opened her eyes wide, unable to believe that her own girl could be so brave. The observer stared blankly at the mosaic and said, "What happened?" Lin Shuang looked at Wu Xie and suddenly lifted the hem of his clothes in a mischievous manner. Wu Xie quickly turned around and said, "Lin Shuang, what are you doing? Put it down quickly." Lin Shuang couldn't help but laugh, but he still restrained his voice. After all, there were still people outside, who knew if they were listening. "Teasing you, turn around." Wu Xie turned back half believing and half doubting, and only breathed a sigh of relief when she saw Lin Shuang dressed neatly. "Why are you teasing me?" Men and women are not compatible, and you even locked the door. Lin Shuang chuckled and took a few steps forward, standing in the center of the bathroom. You come over, he said. Wu Xie took 2 steps and said, what's wrong? Lin Shuang looked at half a meter away with a complex expression and said, get closer. Be more conscious. Wu Xie walked 2 steps away from Lin Shuang in confusion, somewhat puzzled. Lin Shuang looked at him carefully for a while before suddenly saying, which evil is your evil? Wu Xie didn't understand, but still obediently answered, innocent and innocent. What's wrong? Lin Shuang has increased the probability. How many uncles do you have? Wu Xie doesn't understand. Did you check your household registration? 2. Lin Shuang looked at Wu Xie and suddenly exclaimed, what are their names? Wu Xie suddenly became wary and said, why are you asking so carefully? Lin Shuang's expression was complex. To be honest, maybe I have more information than you imagine here. Wu Xie was dumbfounded. What information? Lin Shuang hesitated for a moment and said, no, what I mean is, you answer my question truthfully. I may have more information than you imagine here. Wu Xie awkwardly rubbed the corner of her clothes and said, oh, my second uncle is Wu Erbai, and my third uncle is Wu Sanqing. Lin Shuang continued to have a complex expression, 1 poor, 2 white and 3 provinces. Are these 3 names? Wu Xie is not surprised either. Everyone on the road knows the 3 members of the Wu family. Yes, is there any problem? Lin Shuang let out a faint sigh and said, keep it down, do you still have a friend named Zhang Qiling? Is your index and middle fingers relatively long? Do you have a chubby friend named Wang Yueban? Wu Xie frowned. Are the 3 of them already so famous? Yes. Lin Shuang looked at Wu Xie with a simple expression on his face. Although it may be a pretense, he was still a bit naive. Which tomb have you been to recently? Wu Xie looked wary and said, what do you mean, a note? Lin Shuang rubbed his brows and said, I don't mean anything to you. I don't like to be so suspicious, just say it. Wu Xie looked at her but didn't speak. Lin Shuang frowned and said, maybe we'll team up next. It's best to answer my question first. Wu Xie looked skeptical and said, why do you think we can team up? The 2 outside don't have much advantage over you. Lin Shuang's expression faded. You're right. However, out of kindness, I kindly remind you not to reveal your identity. After speaking, turn around and leave. Wu Xiegu pondered, wait a minute, we can form a team. Lin Shuang turned to look at him and said, I don't really need to team up. Wu Xie felt a bit embarrassed, I'm sorry, because we're not very familiar yet, so. A stuttering sentence. Lin Shuang walked back and said, it's okay, so which is your last tomb here? Wu Xie thought for a moment and said, it should be the Yunding Heavenly Palace in Changbai Mountain. Lin Shuang was surprised and said, Yunding Heavenly Palace. So fast. Chapter 6. Campus Shadows 5. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wu Xie looked at Lin Shuang with suspicion, whose person is this? What does it mean? What's fast? What does it mean? Lin Shuang looked at Wu Xie and said, you may be quite shocked to say it, but the fact is, the world you are in is a novel of our world, a tomb-raiding novel. Wu Xie was confused. I know the novel, but how could it be? The people next to me are all real. Lin Shuang's face remained calm. First of all, you need to calm down now. Secondly, this is true, but its authenticity is uncertain, and the specific situation is not clear. Finally, no matter what we think now, we don't have much time. Let me finish it first. Wu Xie's stunned reply was still difficult to accept that the world she was in was just a novel world, okay. Lin Shuang looked at him and sighed again, have you regained your senses? The next words are more important. Wu Xie struggled to muster up his energy. The impact was too great and he was caught off guard. You tell me, he said. Lin Shuang stared at Wu Xie seriously and said, now you are already an example, which is the basis for my determination of this idea. Let's first call your world with similar situations a small world, which means that there are also people from other small worlds entering the game now. However, it is unclear which world they are. The most likely ones to enter are the most popular small worlds, and according to the fairness of the game, the first batch of players must have equal strength to be considered fair. So, being the first to enter the small worlds in the game, you should be the most popular among them, for no other reason. Your world is very, very popular among us. Other players with similar abilities can hardly surpass you. But with more fans, gods, ghosts, cows, and horses have emerged, and even if someone discovers that you are from the small world, they may want to dissect you. And remember, currently no one has found that the small world has also participated in the game. So, you can't expose your identity, especially your fans in the world, they know you better than you do. This is the most dangerous. Wu Xie listened to these words and tried to digest them. If you say that, then I have already given my name. Why haven't the other two reacted? Lin Shuang sighed and said, one reason is that they don't know about your small world, and another reason is that they are also from the small world. Wu Xie's face turned pale. What about those who watch my live broadcast? Lin Shuang looked at him with some tenderness. They were really right, poor little dog. Don't be afraid, the game has just begun, and most of them are in a panic. They will definitely jump around for a while before they calm down. They won't just start watching the live broadcast. Not everyone is as calm as we are. Moreover, our self-introduction was relatively early, and basically after the system finished speaking, we started to introduce ourselves. I'm sure not many people saw it. Furthermore, how could there be fewer people entering the game? When we find them, there will be even fewer people staying in our live broadcast room. It can even be said that there are no people, and generally no one has such a brain teaser. At most, they just feel that the novel reflects reality. After speaking meaningfully, he looked at Wu Xie. So, do you want me to play the role of a fan who accidentally bumped into a name? Wu Xie understood her subtext after a moment of thought. Lin Shuangru nodded obediently, truly deserving of the intellectual responsibility in tomb raiding. Not only that, but if you can use an alias in the future, try to use it as much as possible, and also determine the style and personality of your role. Before the gods in your world arrive, change your habits, but there is a universal saying. Lin Shuang looked at Wu Xixing's gloating smile and said in a coquettish tone, I'm a fan of Wu Xixing. In order to get closer to my idol, I worked hard to study his habits. Wu Xie's face instantly turned red. Curious, learn from yourself. Lin Shuang chuckled and said, we're dancing in front of the main master. Haha. Smiled and quickly restrained. Wu Xie suddenly reacted and said, but what you said, the gods of our world. Who? He looked at the sudden playful expression on Lin Shuang's face, and for some reason, he suddenly got it, stupid oil bottle. The answer is correct. Lin's smile intensified in his eyes. Wu Xie felt a bit uneasy when she was laughed at. Only a few knew that Zhang Qiling was a stuffy oil bottle. Without familiarity, it was impossible to know who the stuffy oil bottle was, and they had only met for the first time. It seems that what she said is true, but is the world they live in just a novel world? Is there anything else to pay attention to? Lin Shuang stared at Wu Xie and pinched his fingers. Yes, I'll keep telling you about your world. I'll talk to you later, and now I'll talk to you about privacy code protection. Privacy coding has been on since I just locked the door, and the screen on your end is also the same. If you want privacy coding, just tell the system in your mind what you want to do, such as toileting, bathing, sexual desire, etc., and the system will reply to you immediately. If it's over, just tell the system it's over. The next content, don't forget, this is a survival game, so where do we survive? Where does survival reflect? Wu Xie's face became solemn. You're right, but since he came, everyone has relaxed their guard. This is not right. Lin Shuang still looked at him with a good eye and said, that's right, including you. But you usually deal with underground things, so in this normal environment, you naturally relax a bit, which is understandable. As for others, in a normal social environment, it's even more normal to be unable to react at the moment. Moreover, this environment is very normal, with nothing wrong. Even if the environment suddenly changes, everyone will let go of their guard after knowing that this is a game. After all, the most important thing about games is that they can be resurrected infinitely. But don't forget, the system has said that it only gives us one life protection count, which means we will die after this count is used up. And now let me tell you about the dangers that may exist on campus. Despite the mediocre campus, it is actually the most dangerous place. I don't know if you have heard any ghost stories or dirty things about the campus. I'm talking to you now. Wu Xie's expression became eerie as she listened to the last sentence. Is the storyteller really hammering? Lin Shuang had been paying attention to the change in Wu Xie's expression. Seeing his sudden strange expression, he recalled what he had said and realized the source of the change in Wu Xie's expression. She smiled helplessly and said, the most famous thing on campus is campus violence, as well as some taboos, corruption, and of course, unreasonable regulations and punishments. Do you know what I mean by taboos? Wu Xie nodded solemnly and said, I know. Those beasts, damn it. Lin Shuang just smiled, meaning something unclear. Another one is the ghost story. It's strange, isn't it? Why did the ghost story come into this? Wu Xie frowned and said, are you saying, a realistic ghost story? Lin Shuang nodded and said, that's right. But I usually call it an instantiated ghost story. We don't have anything to deal with ghosts. Wu Xie's face turned a bit ugly. Lin Shuang suddenly felt like sighing. She gave a brief smile and said, games cannot allow us to come in and die without resistance, so there must be limitations. For example, if we violate a rule, or at a certain point in time, it will appear, but there must be a place for protection. Besides, the system also gave us one life protection cycle. If we die once, we can still live again. At this point, Lin Shuang once again showed a gloating smile and said, of course, if time doesn't get stuck, you'll have to die countless times to protect your life. Wu Xie looked at Lin Shuang and sighed inwardly. Where did the little girl come from? She just entered the game for a few minutes, right? Can a normal person analyze these all at once? And she told herself everything directly, not afraid of my backstabbing. However, since she knows me, she definitely knows my temperament, which should be her biggest reliance. Lin Shuang could roughly guess what Wu Xie was thinking just by looking at his eyes spinning around, the progress of Yunding Heavenly Palace. At this time, it was the most perfect time to challenge this game. Lin Shuang paused for a moment and gave Wu Xie some time to accept. There is also a very fatal issue that everyone may have overlooked, which is the time issue. Wu Xie's hair stood on end in an instant. Yes, everyone had forgotten that if there was no time limit to a game, it would mean that everyone would have to be trapped in it before reaching the end. Wu Xie had experienced many large tombs and strange species at least, and managed to calm down. Why did all of us ignore it? This is clearly unreasonable, she said. Lin Shuang spoke very casually, there may be three types. The first, which nobody has experienced and is naturally unaware of, the second, which is intentional misleading in the game, and the third, which is assimilation with the NPC in the game. Wu Xie pinched her palm and felt greatly shocked. Assimilation. Do you mean becoming an NPC in the end? Lin Shuang smiled brilliantly and said, well, let's think about it. If there is no time limit in the game, if we can't complete the task, will we have to stay in the game all the time? If there is a time limit, what will happen if we can't complete the task within the specified time? Plus, are we still playing a role? Wu Xie carefully pondered on what Lin Shuang had said, which was a problem he would not encounter in the tomb. In the tomb, if there were time constraints, it would be like an underwater tomb where there was a lack of oxygen, and this survival game was a field he was not familiar with at all, especially with such advanced games. Lin Shuang looked at Wu Xie, who was lost in thought, and didn't speak up to continue outputting. He just waited quietly for Wu Xie to finish thinking. Wu Xie didn't think about it for too long. After all, it was a bit unbelievable to accept. After this stage, it became much easier. Why do you say it might be a misleading game? Upon hearing the question, Lin Shuang honestly stated, maybe it's to train us, screen talents, or maybe it's to help them assimilate faster. You can think about the purpose of the game. After all, doing something always has a purpose. Lin Shuang gave Wu Xie an encouraging smile. Wu Xie frowned and said, since the game talks about fairness and balance, it must follow the rules. Under what circumstances is fairness and balance pursued? Lin Shuang blurted out, you can think about studying. Wu Ximeng looked up and said, that's right, this is screening talents. Everyone's starting point is the same, but the only difference is their initial intelligence and the resources they acquire, just like we do now. Lin Shuang nodded and said, that's right, one more thing. Do you remember the purpose of the game's live broadcast? Chapter 7. Campus Shadows 6. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wu Xie recalled the system saying, in order to ensure survival rate, learn from lessons and experiences. Wu Xie punched his left palm with his right hand and said, so this is like a game of raising goo, it's about selecting excellent people. Lin Shuang continued to nod. The outside world looked at the screen still typing, feeling a bit numb. Zhang Qiling looked at the coding protection that had not been cancelled yet, and was no longer willing to believe that Wu Xie would have done such a thing. He couldn't help but suspect, otherwise why wouldn't it be cancelled? I didn't expect that even with my black glasses, I just casually said it. Shouldn't I really say it right? Can it be that Wu Xie has finally enlightened? Love at first sight. Zhang Qiling frowned slightly, ignoring the nonsense of his black glasses, although it was very likely. Wu Erbai and Wu Sanqing looked at the screen with exciting expressions, although they were happy that they might have a niece and daughter. Law. It was just a matter of how they looked, but it didn't go well. Jiao Yanhuan couldn't help but exclaim, Wu Xie is brave enough. Live streaming, with so many people doing it. Jia Yuchen looked at the screen still typing and thought that his childhood friend should not be this kind of person, but still couldn't help but think, may it be too long since we last saw each other, and childhood friend has also changed. Hu Xiuxiu's face had already turned red. Brother Wu Xie is too unpretentious. The others also showed strange expressions and couldn't help but mutter to themselves. Lin Fei and Lin Shuang's family looked at the coding screen with a bright expression. In the gaming world, Wu Xie still doesn't know that her reputation has been compromised. Wu Xie couldn't help but murmur, as the first group of players, we are the weakest group to learn from experience and lessons. No, what about the old, weak, sick, and disabled? How do we calculate? Lin Shuang couldn't help but smile as she listened to Wu Xie's push. Although the smile on her face had never subsided, it was just a more sincere smile this time. What experience can you learn from letting the elderly, weak, sick, and disabled come in? As the first group of players, it's impossible to have no advantage. What's so fun in that game? Wu Xie looked embarrassed and said, that's right. It's my fault. Lin Shuanghua confirmed his words, we are indeed the weakest group, compared to the others who have not yet come in. Moreover, it is impossible for a large number of people to come in at once. We are currently in the internal testing phase. Internal testing refers to the probationary period. Lin Shuang was afraid that Wu Xie wouldn't understand, so he explained it specifically. Wu Xie nodded to indicate that she understood. Lin Shuangcai continued, and do you remember what the system said later to maintain order? Wu Xie quickly recalled this time, please accept reality, no matter where you go, you cannot escape the game, do not increase casualties. Please ensure the normal operation of the world, leaders. Wu Xie also realized, in order to maintain order, it is impossible to take people from the same stage away, let alone you mentioned that there are other small worlds, and there are too many people, which makes it difficult to find excellent examples. Lin Shuang was very satisfied, and his mind was spinning fast. So it's impossible to have many people all at once. 10,000 people and 1,000 people are the peak. No matter how many people there are, it won't work. Moreover, it's impossible for everyone to honestly guard their own live broadcast rooms in batches, which also leads to many exciting scenes not being discovered. This will be a huge loophole. Wu Xie nodded approvingly. He had already begun to admire Lin Shuang. The system had only said a few words and analyzed so much hidden information from some words. Others were still immersed in the thought of playing games. Then we should just have bad luck and become the first batch of players, Wu Xie smiled bitterly, knowing that he had a bit of a cult on him. It can't be said that it's not good, what the first batch of players can get may be better than later. Although there are also many disadvantages, such as lack of experience to learn from, and the possibility of losing too many people due to difficulty control. But these are not problems, because with experience, the game will definitely increase the difficulty based on our strength. After we finish the game, we will definitely improve our strength, and at the same time, we will have more experience in completing the game. We need to ensure fairness and balance. The next batch of players who come in cannot have the same strength as us now. Wu tilted his dog's eyes and said, he was someone who was stronger than us from the beginning. Yes. But equally, to ensure equal strength and world stability, it is impossible to bring in a second batch just after finishing a game. The speed is too fast, and many worlds may not have had time to adjust. At that time, order may collapse again. And it's only one game, so there isn't much experience and lessons for them. At least 2 to 3 games will be played before the second batch of players can be drawn. Wu Xie quickly followed Lin Shuang's thinking and said, based on this calculation, there must be a time limit for each game, and it is impossible for us to keep wasting time. Time is too long, and human lifespan is too short. It will take at least a month for the world to stabilize roughly. But 21 days is enough for them to fully adapt to this sudden game. Based on the recent time, in this way of calculation, based on 3 games per game, a game can only have 7 days to complete, or even less. Because it's not necessarily that the second batch of players will come in after 3 games. Lin Shuang nodded and said, that's right, but as we are the first batch of players, we haven't seen or touched each other before. There's a high probability that the time will be within 5 or 7 days, and it's meaningless if it's too long. Because it will only make the first batch of players more relaxed, and in the end, they will die more, only learning lessons and not gaining experience. Wu Shirua thought for a moment and said, this is the reason. There should be a clear indication of this time limit in the game, and it is impossible not to give any clues at all. Lin Shuang was very satisfied and said, yes, so let's first push some clues about this game. However, we've been waiting for a bit long. Let's go to your room and take a look first. Wu Xie also realized that they had been chatting for at least 10 minutes. Looking at the room, it was already a bit long. Okay, let's go out quickly, he said. Lin Bianbian called the system in his mind and walked towards the bathroom door. System, the shower is over. The system responded coldly, full screen privacy coding has been cancelled. Lin Shuang opened the door and said, let's go. The crowd in the real world looked at the disappearing QR code, but their expressions became even more exciting. Black Glasses took out his phone and glanced at time. Good boy, is Wu Xie not doing this? It's only a dozen or so minutes. Black Glasses couldn't help but sigh, young people can't do it, we still need to make up for it. Zhang Qiling carefully examined the two of them, dressed neatly, and finally breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Wu Xia was not so reckless, so he heard the words of Black Glasses and couldn't bear to interrupt. Nothing happened. Jia Yuchen was also carefully observing the two of them, very well, as if nothing had happened. Wu Xia is indeed not this kind of person. Hu Xiuxiu was a bit disappointed, but luckily she didn't see Wu Xia's brother wrong. Wu Erbai looked at the neatly dressed two and felt a strong hatred towards each other. Although the little girl had some problems, she was missing a niece and daughter. Law, which was not a disadvantage. As long as Wu Xia was well behaved, she could also be replaced. Wu Sanqing breathed a sigh of relief. Although he didn't stop Wu Xia from falling in love, this was a survival game. The little girl looked suspicious, and if the little bunny was used, it would be over. Jia Lianhuan also thinks the same way. The gaming world is not where they are now, only Wu Xia is there. What if it is calculated? Lin Fei and the others also breathed a sigh of relief, and she said that Lin Shuang was not this kind of person. The observer, however, was very puzzled. If they didn't do anything, what did they say in the past 10 minutes? Why do we need to code? Black Glasses were equally curious. Mute, it seems that they are talking about some little secret that is not suitable for us to listen to. Zhang Qiling was too lazy to turn his head back. He carefully examined Wu Xia's face and found that Wu Xia looked at Lin Shuang with some admiration. He even followed behind Lin Shuang half a step and said, "Lin Shuang knows about the game." Black Glasses sat up abruptly and said, "What?" He also carefully watched the way they got along. Lin Shuang looked at Wu Xia, who had taken half a step behind him, with a smile and said, "What are you doing?" "Walk with me," with the same attitude as before and now. Wu Xia followed Lin Shuang in a low voice and replied, "Okay." Lin Shuang pulled up Wu Xia's clothes again, with a smile on his face, and followed Wu Xia out of the room. This little girl can't be the embodiment of the game, can she? Just like that monster, said Black Glasses with a click. Zhang Qiling listened to this opinion and began to think seriously. And there is no shortage of intelligent people in this world. A few of them quickly judged something through the interaction between Wu Xia and Lin Shuang. It seems that Lin Shuang must know something. Black Glasses let out a strange cry. If that's true, it's too dramatic. Does the game favor Wu Xia? Zhang Qiling flapped his previous thoughts expressionlessly. It must have been the blind man who brought him such outrageous thoughts. Black Glasses couldn't detect Zhang Qiling's mental activity at all and still couldn't believe it. Why is this kid so lucky? Suddenly, I remembered the evil sect that Dao had uploaded, and as soon as I spoke, I changed the prefix and said, "How could this kid be so lucky when he goes to the gaming world?" Zhang Qiling silently released the low pressure, and the black blind man was speechless, blind. Black Glasses gave a satisfied smack and said, Okay, he's also quite lucky with us." Zhang Qiling ignored others. The observer reported to his superiors with a bitter face, "Boss, just now both Lin Shuang and Wu Xia's live broadcast rooms were coded, and it took more than 10 minutes to disappear." "Can you observe what they did?" said the superior. Feeling a little headache, the observer lowered his head in shame and said, "The two of them should have spoken, reached a consensus, and perhaps even reached some conditions. It should be related to the game." The superior couldn't help but worry, knowing that they needed to avoid suspicion, and there was no need to do so. Well, there should be their own considerations. Let's go back and continue reading. The observer saluted and said, "Yes." Quickly go back and continue to stare at Lin Shuang. In the game world, Ning Bin and Zhang Wei, along with the two people with strange expressions staring at the door, didn't see anything wrong, but looked at a room for more than 10 minutes. I carefully observed Lin Shuang again and found that she had a smile on her face. I thought it was Wu Xia who went in to coax Lin Shuang, but there was no sound coming out. Did the coaxing sound a bit low? That's right, I just met. How could I be so dedicated? Although they still feel a bit strange, the two of them have no intention of pursuing it. Chapter 8. Campus Shadows 7. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Wei and the first one spoke up, both of you, would you like to talk about this game? Wu Xia smiled politely and said, wait a moment, I'll go take a look at my room. Wu Xia pulled Lin Shuang towards the remaining unopened room. Zhang Wei and He Ningbin twitched their lips. Although they had just separated to check, they had to look together like conjoined babies. Wu Xia opened the door and found that the layout inside was the same as Lin Shuang's room. He opened the drawer of the cabinet, which was empty inside. When he opened the cabinet again, it was also empty, and there was nothing wrong with it. Lin Shuang followed behind Wu Xia and closed the door. Seeing Wu Xia looking around, she suddenly remembered the ceiling. She looked up at the ceiling and saw that the fluorescent light hanging from it had probably been replaced in advance and was very new. The ceiling is also very clean, except for one stain that should not be wiped off. It is only located on the other side away from the bathroom and fits well with the wall. Lin Shuang's expression instantly became serious. She called out softly, Wu Xia, come here. Wu Xia looked back with some confusion, but still came over honestly, what's wrong? Lin Shuang grabbed his wrist and said, Wu Xia, don't be too far away from me. Wu Xia felt the force coming from her wrist. Is this, afraid? Is there a situation? Wu Xia quickly asked, what's wrong? Don't be afraid. Lin Shuang slowly exhaled and pointed to the stain, Wu Xia, look over there. Wu Xia saw the stain and didn't understand what the problem was. She could only lower her head and hope that Lin Shuang would clarify, what's wrong with it. Lin Shuang frowned and said, a stain that cannot be cleaned up, what do you think? Wu Xia had a big nerve and didn't understand. Ah! Lin Shuang was not afraid at all in an instant. They cleaned the room clean, and there was a stain that could not be cleaned, which is enough to indicate many problems, and it is at the angle between the ceiling and the wall. Perhaps I am afraid of ghosts and the like, so my first thought is that there is something that exists there for a long time, which is why there is such an indelible mark. Black Glasses chuckled and said, mute, this little girl is too cute, isn't she? Such a reasonable speculation has come out. Zhang Qiling, on the other hand, looked thoughtfully at the stain on their screen and said, before, let Wu Xia remember the pattern. Black Glasses remembered it, but still a bit indifferent. A room that has been in existence for a long time will definitely not be new, just like a newly renovated house. It is normal to have some stains. The chubby guy had already gone to study the rules. Judging from the little girl's treatment of Wu Xia, he knew that Wu Xia was not going to get into trouble at the moment. It's better to first see how this game works. Wu Erbai and Wu Sanqing didn't take it seriously either, after all, it was just a little girl movie. Even if this little girl did know something, it was too shocking. Jia Yuchen and Jiao Yanhuan are seriously thinking about it. If it is really what this little girl said, then it is indeed possible. Lin Fei is a bit panicked, she also believes in ghosts, and this game is a survival game, and it is normal to have something that threatens life. And this entire floor looks very different. The observer, upon hearing Lin Shuang's words, expressed doubts that there are no ghosts in this world. Wu Xia had a slight suspicion, but upon reflection, this was the first time we had met in a game, and it was not impossible for something to really happen. Moreover, he had seen the puppet that appeared in the water thief cave before, and it was normal for such a thing to appear. Hiss, isn't that very unsafe? Wu Xia whispered to Lin Shuang as he approached. Have you seen the ceiling of my room? Lin Shuang also lowered his voice. No, you suspect there's something in every room. Wu Xia had already followed Lin Shuang's brain circuit. Yes, let's first discuss the rules of this game. Let's go check out the other 3 rooms later. Lin Xuanmu blushed, and the gloomy atmosphere was once again stirred up by Wu Xia. Okay. Wu Xia walked towards the bathroom first. Lin Shuang covered his forehead with 2 fingers and grabbed Wu Xie with one hand. Don't go in, if there's really something, wouldn't we just fall into the trap when we go in? Wu Xie tilted her head slightly embarrassed and stopped, okay. Lin Shuang curled up the corners of his mouth, dumbfounded. Although he was very clever and probably couldn't play with him, he still felt that Wu Xie's behavior was a real blow to the little dog. Thinking this way in my heart, I started calling the system in my mind, "System, I need to." Lin Shuang's eyes rolled and he smiled mischievously, "Go to the bathroom. There is a momentary code disorder in the system, humans, don't be too outrageous, just open your eyes and talk nonsense. Privacy full-screen coding protection has been enabled for players." Lin Shuang laughed out loud. Zhang Wei and Ning Bin in the living room exchanged inexplicable glances when they heard laughter. "Are they a little couple?" Zhang Wei said with an indescribable expression. Ning Bin continued, "A little couple who fell in love at first sight." The rest of the outside world were stunned as they watched the live broadcast room where the code was typed again. Black Glasses pointed blankly at the screen and said, "Mute, why? A secret needs to be told separately twice. What rules are we not worthy of listening to?" Zhang Qiling was also a bit anxious, but her face remained calm and said, "I don't know." Black Glasses laughed heartily and said, "You don't even know, Mute. Ha ha ha, then I can rest assured. But what can this little girl analyze? It's not worth listening to yet. It's quite impressive." Zhang Qiling tried hard to look at the screen filled with mosaic, trying to find their figures in the mosaic, but the game's products must be exquisite. The thick mosaic couldn't find any difference, and even the sound was turned off tightly. The observer became anxious and said, "No, what code are you typing? You can parse the rules and analyze them for everyone. Don't be too clumsy." The superior also leaned over and looked at the screen full of QR codes, sighing and sighing, "This little girl is just too far-sighted. But it's also good, it's a bit confident. Although the country has also arranged for people to analyze the rules, what if they hear something they haven't researched yet?" Lin Fei was also very curious. She was not very familiar with Lin Shuang, and it can be said that she did not understand her personality at all. However, looking at the live broadcast room where she typed the code again, she sighed a bit regretfully and couldn't help but feel grateful. Since Lin Shuang had the idea, he should be able to survive. Wu Erbai and Wu Sanqing are also a bit anxious, but they both have rules in hand and can analyze on their own. It's not very urgent, it's better to listen more than to analyze alone. However, they don't give face and play whenever they want. Jiao Yanhuan looked at the screen that had already been coded and lowered his head to start listing the rules previously broadcasted by the system. Previously, there was no time to parse these rules because it was necessary to determine Wu Xie's life and death. Now that it is confirmed that Lin Shuang will not take action against Wu Xie at this stage, he must start studying the rules. Others also continued to ponder the rules of system broadcasting. Lin Shuang looked at Wu Xie, who was obediently looking at him, and after some thought, he said, "I coded the live broadcast room." Wu Xie was a bit surprised, "Why do we need to code?" Lin Shuang tugged at the corner of his mouth and said, "Is it embarrassing not to code? What if someone is watching? You need to know the strength of the country, probably someone has already been studying everyone's live broadcast room. If it were just a group of Tianzong prodigies watching us two rookies chattering away. The analysis may not be accurate yet." Wu Xie suddenly realized, "You're right. There are too many geniuses in this world, and we are still the weakest ones to come in. If anyone is watching, it's like playing tricks on the door." Lin Shuang didn't really want to admit it, but the fact was, "That's right, I have a thin skin, so it's better to type." Wu Xie also nodded. Indeed, since he was young, the chubby guy, his second and third uncles, and the stuffy oil bottle must be watching. If we analyze something that doesn't make sense, wouldn't we be laughing to death? Lin Shuangyo spoke up and finally began to analyze. As the first batch of players to come in, the worst thing is that we don't have any previous strategies to refer to, we rely solely on hard work to try our chances. Wu Xie remembered several tombs she had laid, but with professionals leading the way, she also had specialized knowledge about the tombs. Now I really don't know what to ask and don't understand anything. Lin Shuang continued, the system specifically pointed out the rules for this game. Lin Shuang changed the topic and said, do you have a pen and paper on you? Wu Xie touched her pocket, feeling embarrassed. No, she said. The person who was pulled in this time was caught off guard, and it was not in the tomb, there was nothing. Lin Shuang suddenly remembered that she had brought her phone in. She took out the phone and saw that it had a battery level of 98. She thanked herself for fully charging it every morning. Wu Xie saw Lin Shuang pull out a rectangular object with the screen still on and was a bit confused. What is this? Lin Shuang fiddled with his phone without looking back. A phone is just a more advanced phone. Wu Xie looked enviously at the very smart phone at first glance, and when she touched her own button press, she felt a little insecure. The difference in technological strength between one's own world and the other's world is too great. Lin Shuang opened the memo on his phone and looked up to see Wu Xie's somewhat lonely expression. Looking at the phone in his hand, he understood what he was thinking, but was a bit uncertain. Is Wu Xie the kind of person who feels insecure? It's just that. Lin Shuang averted his gaze and looked straight at the stain. Your world was born out of our world, but you are now just us from over a decade ago. Looking at it, Lin Shuang couldn't help but extend his hand again to hold on to Wu Xie, still unable to resist wild thoughts and fear. Wu Xie's spirit lifted, and now the most important thing is still the game. Let's talk about the rules, he said. Lin Shuang wrote the rules in the memo, holding her phone to show Wu Xie. The system said that the first game is campus education, isn't it normal? After all, the campus needs to do two things, one is teaching and the other is educating. So why is this education just proposed? Wu Xie's mind spun rapidly as she said, there have been instances of unethical and legal behavior on campus. We are teachers, should we teach our classmates to be good people? Lin Shuang nodded and said, yes, but this range does not necessarily refer to students. As the saying goes, learning is endless, and one is never too old to learn. Wu Xie understood and said, it may also include management and teachers. Lin Shuang nodded and shook his head, not only that, but don't forget, what can't be missing from school. Chapter 9. Campus Shadows 8. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wu Xie carefully considered that there would definitely be activities for another group of people besides teachers, leaders, and students in the school. Wu Xie blurted out, parents' meeting. Lin Shuang nodded and said, did you also have a parent-teacher meeting at that time? Wu Xie smiled awkwardly and said, of course I did. I was even called a parent. Lin Shuang was a bit curious, but now is not the time to say that. Yes, there is also a parent, and these identities are related to the campus. Do you know why I included parents in it? Wu Xie hesitated for a moment and said, because parents have a greater influence on their children. Lin Shuang took 2 slow steps and said, this is just a little bit. Do you remember a question you asked Te? Wu Xie thought to herself, thanks to my good memory, otherwise I wouldn't remember this question. Teacher, he lives on campus. I'll invite you out another day. Wu Xie paused and said, we can go out. That's right, he just said there's no need to go out to eat, he didn't say he can't go out, but just in case, we need to find someone to try it out. We have 4 people, including the number of lifeguards, 8 lives, which is equivalent to 8 people. These 8 lives need to be carefully calculated, otherwise it is very likely that 1 or 2 will die here. Lin Shuang said coldly. Wu Xie agreed very much. Even though our former friends were not here, we still had to cooperate in unfamiliar environments. Yes, so the 4 of us have to cooperate, she said. Collaboration is not necessary, information can be shared. I can't trust them, Lin said calmly. It's also possible. Short-term cooperation is possible, Wu Xia struggled weakly. Lin Shuang didn't react much. He had known that Wu Xia was such a kind-hearted person. You don't know how bad a person can be when facing life and death. You used to have someone to protect you, but now I still need you to protect me. The situation is different. Just give a warm reminder within your ability range. And the remaining two are not fuel-efficient lights either. You don't need to worry about them. To be honest, you may be even weaker than them. Although Wu Xia may be a bit dissatisfied, he is not judged by his appearance, and now no one can protect him in times of danger. Lin Shuang looked at Wu Xia, whose ears were drooping, and didn't know what came to mind. He sighed in his heart, let's wait until they pass my assessment. Wu Xia was confused and said, how should we assess in this game? Lin Shuang tapped his head and said, the assessment is always here. Now let's talk about the rest, the topic has deviated. Wu Xia covered her head and entrusted Chu Baba, oh. Black Glasses and Zhang Qiling looked at the rules and prompts in front of them. Black Glasses touched their chin and said, mute, this game is a bit wild. This way is very innovative. Zhang Qiling can now ignore the words of his black glasses. He looks a bit confused at the rules in front of him, campus. Black Glasses turned around and saw Zhang Qiling's bewildered little gaze. TSK, this campus is like a school, teaching knowledge and doing ideological work for students. But I'm not very clear about this high school either. I've only been to college. But it's also 8 or 9 or 10. But neither of these two rules is difficult, mute. What does this prompt mean? Zhang Qiling tried hard to understand, but couldn't understand. He had no knowledge of this aspect at all. Black Glasses also knew that Zhang Qiling couldn't say it. He looked left and right and said, hiss, we need these teachers to dedicate themselves. Shouldn't that be when wax torches turn into ashes and tears start to dry? Why would it be when flowers fall and spring mud protect flowers more? Zhang Qiling listened quietly to his Black Glasses muttering, correcting them seriously, there's no better protection. Black Glasses patted his hands and said, yes, isn't that saying that flowers are scattered and turned into mud? This flower refers to a girl. The girl withered and died. Was she killed? So the previous sentence was the place where the girl's bones were buried after she died. Zhang Qiling pondered and understood, using analogical analysis. Black Glasses smugly said, mute, how's it going? Black Lord, can I push it? Zhang Qiling responded generously this time, Black Glasses was surprised and said, hey, mute, do you think so too? Black Lord, I am indeed the best. You can't compare to me, mute. Ha ha ha. Zhang Qiling slightly twitched the corner of her mouth, she should shut up next time. Wu Erbai looked at these two rules. The first and second rules seem to be clearly duplicated. Why did he add a rule 2 specifically? Campus, what does it fit the campus? The campus environment. Settings. Rules. This thing is very miscellaneous, and it's not easy to make a conclusion. Wu Sanqing focuses on prompts, why would he only present one prompt? What is the function of prompts? The system did not say that the prompt was specially given, but it means that there will be a prompt in each game, which may be the key to completing the game. Jia Yuchen also realized this, and the name of the game was also very interesting. Although he didn't stay on campus seriously, he still knew some things about campus. The primary focus on campus is teaching, which is assumed to be the top priority. However, the word education is specifically marked here, indicating that this content is related to education. The chubby guy is very careful. Looking at the clues revealed by the system in just a few sentences, he has roughly guessed some, but except for a potential danger, he believes that innocence can handle everything else. Lin Shuang pulled Wu Xia around the room and said, "For now, Rule 1 is that players need to maintain their identity and persona. Currently, it is known that we are all teachers. What is the persona of a teacher? Teaching and educating. So all we need to do is do this. As for other trivial matters and teaching methods about teachers, they are actually played by ourselves. Because teachers have different personalities, their behavior naturally also varies. Remember the 4 words teaching and educating people in this rule." Wu Xia took careful notes. The two of them paused in one place from time to time, stood for a while before continuing to walk. "Now let's talk about Rule 2, behavior that conforms to the campus. What is meant to conform to the campus?" To be honest, this sentence is the most difficult to understand, but it is actually very easy to understand. Most of this rule should be on students, such as smoking and fighting, but there are also some behaviors that teachers cannot do. But isn't campus violence also a fight? It also exists on campus. Wu Xia couldn't understand. Lin Shuang raised his eyebrows helplessly and said, "What does campus want? It's youth and tranquility. So if it's for the students, it's about educating them. If it is the latter part, it constrains us and prohibits us from engaging in unreasonable behavior. Because it is difficult to analyze which point Rule 2 targets, let's just assume that to achieve these 2 goals, let it all be completed. So if we become students, we will be very restricted, but the teacher's restrictions will be much less. The difficulty has been reduced. But similarly, in education, we may also encounter thorns. At this time, we cannot directly take action and can only rely on external forces. Perhaps this is also why we can go out." Lin Shuang looked at Wu Xia, who already understood, but still had some confusion. "Furthermore, we can start from why this game appeared. The purpose of the game is to find talent, so what kind of talent does it need? Gain clearance." Wu Xia hesitated. "What are the conditions for completing the game?" Lin Shuang felt helpless. In fact, the topic has already stated that it is campus education, which is definitely positive, and the clearance conditions achieved should also be positive. Wu Xia's spiritual light flashed, and he was at least a legitimate college student before. Lin Shuangling repeatedly refuted, "Not necessarily, its true purpose of clearance is in the prompt, perhaps it is not limited to the way of clearance. If it is graded according to the final result, the level obtained by positive clearance will be higher. However, it may not be the case, it may also be rated based on the time of clearance." Wu Xia's eyes lit up, "So we both need to." Lin Shuang looked at him in surprise and said, "It's quite ambitious. But I do think so. Next, most importantly, it is also our purpose of clearance. Reminder. Shade and avoid the cold, flowers fall in the spring mud." Wu Xia obediently followed Lin Shuang's footsteps and said, "It's easy to understand the shade and avoid the cold. A place with tree shade is very cool and can provide shade. Does that mean we should do that shade? It's the same as peach and plum trees all over the world." Lin Shuang covered his forehead and said, "Stupid, why isn't it peach and plum, but shade? Ian actually has another explanation. It's not sunny, it's cool and humid." Wu Xia followed Lin Shuang in a daze and said, "So is the coolness." "Yeah, so is the coolness," Lin Shuang said helplessly. Wu Xia reacted and said, "A nest of snakes and mice. Officials protect each other." Lin Shuang let out a breath and said, "It's a bit possible. If you can't see the sunlight, you can't see the light. Things that can't see the light block the wrong things, blocking all the sunlight and providing shelter. So it's very likely an industrial chain. Of course, I can't rule out the possibility you mentioned. But it's not a big problem, just investigate everything. We can't escape those disgusting things or those unreasonable rules." Wu Xia is very curious. Lin Shuang has analyzed so much, should he have already confirmed it? Which one do you think is more likely? Lin Shuang squinted his eyes and said, I actually think that industry chain is the most likely. This teacher dormitory gives me a strange feeling. Things either happen to the teachers or to the students. If it's the teacher, it means we have a very big challenge to face tomorrow. And I observed the layout and size of the school. I think it may be to narrow down our scope and directly focus on the high school department. Because in reality, most of them are from middle school and high school together. And the problem may lie in the two classes we need to teach, Class 7 and Class 8 of Grade 2. We can first think about how we should deal with teachers' exclusion. Directly report to the school leadership. Wu Xie rubbed her chin. Lin didn't even lift his eyelids. It's impossible. If the school manages it, there won't be any new teachers recruited. Wu Xie blurted out, what about using force to suppress it? Lin Shuang glanced at him with a smile on his face and said, sure, but do you know the opponent's strength? What if the opponent has buff stacking? The four of us, and only the three of you may have some combat power, planning to engage in a group fight. Chapter 10. Campus Shadows 9. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wu Xie was completely defeated in the first game, he was weak and weak. We can let the students hit the students, he said. Lin Shuang was 6. Although Wu Xie is not sure what 6 refers to, the tone doesn't sound like praise. As a teacher, can I do this? Where are the privileges of a teacher? Lin Shuang said, resenting that iron cannot be made into steel. Wu Xie said that I am familiar with this move, call the parents. Lin Shuang had already stopped and was tired from walking. Yes, there's one more thing. Remember to record it. If the parents don't reason, we can just take it and file a lawsuit. Wu Xie opened her mouth wide. Yes, isn't it best to leave this matter to the police? Amazing. What if the role of the police is weakened in the game? Lin Shuangpingjing said, everyone has some enemies in this world. So we not only need to inquire about intelligence, but also need to figure out each other's situation. Wu Xie pondered for a moment, really, why didn't he think of it before? Lin Shuang looked up at the wall again and said, the last line of the reminder is that flowers are falling in the spring mud. Wu Xie continued, as the saying goes, flowers fall in the spring mud to protect them better. Does it mean having a spirit of dedication? Lin Shuang remained extremely calm and said, I can't rule out this possibility. There is also a possibility that someone will pick the flower bed and end up throwing it into the spring mud. Wu Xie frowned and said, hurry up and destroy the flowers. These young people are still the flowers of our country. Lin Shuang's gaze finally fell on Wu Xie's face. But don't forget, the possibility you raised, if we only understand it from the first moment, is more like asking the teacher to give their all, die, dedicate themselves, burn themselves, and achieve those students and the school. But from your perspective, the first sentence refers to the existence of an industrial chain, and the second sentence refers to the outcome of those innocent people, Wu said indirectly. Lin Shuang was pleased, it's all possible, but the goal is the same. Regardless of which possibility or speculation, what we need to do is ensure the cleanliness of the campus. And if there were really these things, even if it didn't require me to do it, I would still do it. Those innocent people should truly be liberated. Wu Xie was filled with indignation and said, I would do the same. What a damn thing to do to these blooming girls. Lin Shuang mercilessly interrupted him, all right, we should go see other places. Okay, Wu Xie obediently said. In an instant Lin Shuang once again cut the system in his mind, the system, the toilet is over. Privacy coding has been cancelled. The system said I don't want to know what they have done in these few minutes. Black Glasses has already studied the rules with Zhang Qiling and said, these little guys don't know what they have analyzed. If they don't analyze correctly, wouldn't it be bad? Speaking in reverse, the tone was affirmative. Wu Xie, smart, Zhang Qiling said calmly. Black Glasses has become accustomed to this person who leans solely towards Wu Xie. Yes, Wu Xie is very intelligent, he is the smartest. That little girl is not a vegetarian either, she has a big temper. Jia Yuchen was lost in thought as he looked at the rules and speculations in front of him. The game was not full of malice that wanted people to die. It was a bit like exercise, and it cannot be ruled out that it was actually killing under the guise of training. However, with Wu Xie's intelligence, he should not die too quickly. Wu Erbai and Wu Sanqing still have a lot of confidence in Wu Xie. Wu Xie's mind is not yet fully developed. Apart from not being tough enough, there's no major problem. Jia Lianhuan looked at the decoding screen, and the two still maintained their pre-coding movements, cautiously walking towards the bathroom. The chubby guy also pondered for a while, but it was still the first time he had seen such a type of thing. There were too few clues, only knowing it wasn't fatal, but he might have accidentally died. After all, the real danger hasn't even appeared yet. However, with his naive mind, he could have stayed for a few days and almost figured it out. Hua Xiuxiu also identified some potential rules. But no one dares to say that their speculation is correct. After all, this game is the first time it has appeared and no one can understand its tricks. Lin Shuang glanced at the stain on the wall and followed Wu Xie to the bathroom. It was exactly the same as that in Lin Shuang's room. Lin Shuang and Wu Ximian looked at each other. Wu Xie couldn't help but mutter, "This arrangement is exactly right." Lin Shuang didn't notice this small detail, she only noticed that the layout was the same as her own room. Is it really the same? Wu Xie confirmed, "Really, you know I'm studying architecture, and upon visual inspection, it's really the same without any deviation." Lin Shuang was a bit confused, and his face instantly darkened. "What do I do?" Wu Xie was taken aback for a moment, and Lin Shuang also cursed profanity. "What's wrong?" Black Glasses laughed and said, "Mute, listen, this little girl is also using foul language. I thought she wouldn't know how to do it." "Hee, look at Wu Xie, he's all confused, Zhang Qiling didn't want to hear the noisy laughter, it was just that Lin Shuang never used foul language. He thought she was an elegant little girl, but her temper was a bit explosive. Jia Yuchen raised his eyebrows and looked at the capitalized confusion on Fa Xiaoyan's face, which made him want to laugh a bit, although he also thought that the little girl was someone who didn't curse. "Hey, this little girl is pretty good. She has a determined and straightforward personality," said the chubby man happily. As for Lin Fei, they have become accustomed to saying something when Lin Shuang's emotions fluctuate greatly. The observer also looked at the character analysis written a lot and silently added, cursing profanity. But he also realized something was wrong, the things he placed were exactly the same. How much OCD could he do? Lin Shuang's face darkened. "If I'm not mistaken, things are in big order. Everyone's ears are standing up." "What? What speculation?" Wu Xie thought for a moment about what Lin Shuang had been mentioning and cautiously said, "It's beyond the reach of human labor." The person who looked at it was taken aback, and their mind immediately turned back to it. They were all a bit indifferent, and if there was one, they would definitely have encountered it. This little girl just trusts these things too much and scares herself. Black Glasses propped up his chin and pondered, "Mute, did Wu Xie judge correctly?" Zhang Qiling nodded and also felt something strange. Because none of the people were able to be on site and they didn't watch it so carefully, the live broadcast camera followed the players and could accommodate them all, so what they saw may not be so detailed. Black Glasses didn't quite understand. So who can guarantee that this is exactly the same? The campus is also so secretive. It's just a teacher's dormitory. The muscles on Zhang Qiling's cheeks bulged slightly. Details. Black Glasses slapped his head and said, "I was negligent. This is a game that can take away one's life, not as easy as going to the grave." Jia Yuchen also realized that although he sneered at Lin Shuang's theory of ghosts and gods, it was really hard to say that such a neat thing was a coincidence. The fat man didn't take it seriously. "It's just a coincidence, there's no such thing as that." Lin Shuang nodded and his face sank like water. It shouldn't matter, let's go. Let's go out first. Zhang Wei and Ningbin sat quietly like chickens in the living room, not because they didn't want to talk, but because it would be too troublesome to say it again to the dog couple. The two of them listened to the footsteps and subtle conversations of the dog man and woman inside the house, feeling bored. They probably didn't really treat this as a game, did they? It's too outrageous. These two look quite reliable, why did they do something so unreliable? Ningbin can't wait any longer. Although it hasn't been long, she has been waiting for more than 10 minutes before. This time, she can't sit still anymore. Why don't you just leave them alone? Zhang Wei shook his head with Zhang Sang and said, I don't want a pig teammate. This game will kill people. If I'm tricked to death, I'll have nowhere to cry. Ningbin sat down sullenly and said, okay. The door clicked, and the two people in the living room were refreshed. Finally, they came out, and all the flowers waiting were about to wither. Zhang Wei looked at them with a smile and said, both of you, are you keeping an eye on the room? Wu Xia nodded with a smile and said, the inspection is done. Could you please wait for so long? I'm really sorry. Zhang Weihe wanted to roast. You know it for a long time, but his face was still smiling. Lin Shuang continued, are you two old acquaintances? Zhang Wei paused with his expression, didn't he? I'm still asking questions, why did the topic change to ours? Yeah. We grew up together since childhood. Ningbin and Wu Xia sat quietly on the background board. Lin Shuang looked at the images of the two and had some thoughts circulating in his mind, but he was still thrown out. The relationship is good, let's go take a look at the room first. We just discovered some problems, he said. Zhang Wei was taken aback and realized the problem. This is a combination of men and women, isn't it tiring to work? Okay, let's take a look at my room first. The four of them stood up and walked towards Zhang Weiyu's room. Zhang Weiyu couldn't help but wonder, what problem did you find? Lin Shuang also had some doubts, I don't know what to say, and I'm not sure if it will affect our game, but it's still a bit strange after all. 4 people have entered the room. Lin Shuang and Wu Xia looked at the ceiling for the first time. Sure enough, they had the same position and the same light intensity. Zhang Wei's expression was a bit heavy, but what's wrong? Lin Shuang glanced at him and said, wait a moment, let's go to the bathroom again. Wu Xia obediently followed along. Lin Shuang glanced at the bathroom and then looked at Wu Xia. Wu Xia's face became very serious, and he nodded at Lin Shuang. Lin Shuang suddenly asked Wu Xia, do you remember the placement of all the furniture? Compare it again. Wu Xia recalled the location of the other 2 rooms, then looked at Zhang Weiyu's room, exactly the same. Zhang Wei felt cold behind him and stammered, what, exactly the same? Ningbin silently shrank and hid behind Zhang Weiyu. Lin Shuangskin said, take a careful look at the placement of your furniture. Let's go to Ning. Ningbin is very understanding. Lin Shuang remained unchanged in color, without any shame, and even spoke confidently, Ningbin's room. Zhang Wei was confused, but his feet followed with honesty.